Good evening, Crime Talk aficionados. My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. Thanks for joining us. Before we get started, you know the drill. Subscribe if you haven't. Like if you do. Leave me a comment below, and make sure you hit that little bell for notifications when we go live or put up new content. For those who are maybe just joining us for the first time, my name is Scott Reich. I'm a practicing criminal defense attorney. Been doing it for 30 years. Pretty much handled just about every type of criminal case you could possibly imagine. And we started this channel about 7 years ago, I guess it was, maybe 8, to talk about the Chris Watts case because I was so frustrated by the local news media and their inability to be able to explain what was taking place in actual court cases. So here we are. We started off with the Chris Watts case up in Weld County, Colorado years ago. And we've followed just about every major case since then. You can find us on just about any platform that's out there. We are on obviously YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I think we're on Instagram, right, Frank? Yeah. X, Rumble, and I think that's it. There's a couple of other ones that are out there for a little, but we're not going to do that. We're not going to do some of the smaller ones, so to speak. But we have almost 800,000 subscribers between all of the different platforms. And so we appreciate you being here and taking the time. We put up daily videos Monday through Friday, and then do a weekly recap on Sunday of all of the shows throughout the week, kind of the top stories that we've covered. And usually we do really well, except when we're covering the case of the killer as it relates to Charlie Kirk, Tyler Robinson. For some reason, we haven't had numbers this low, and I can't imagine the biggest story, going on in America right now. All of a sudden, nobody watches our videos. It's very weird. It's almost like, Google has shadow banned us like they've done in the past when they didn't like us using various words on the show. Like, could you imagine using the word murder on a true crime channel? Well, early on, we couldn't say those words. I had to hold up little sticks with the word murder, sexual assault, gun, anything along those lines. They would demonetize you and do it. And we were kind of the early ones when it came to that. And now you can say just about anything, and everybody has a true crime YouTube channel where they can say whatever they want. But in the early days, let me tell you, it was pretty tough. So anyway, we are going to talk about the Tyler Robinson case, the murder, the assassination of Charlie Kirk that took place, on the 10th. And we got new charges today. He was officially charged. Tyler Robinson was officially charged. And the prosecutor who's handling the case there, or, the guy that's the elected DA, gave a press conference today. And he went through the charges against Mr. Robinson. All right. This is going to be prosecuted in the 4th Judicial District. Obviously, it's involving the alleged shooting. No, it was really a shooting of Charlie Kirk. Now, obviously, the defendant is entitled to the presumption of innocence. Hey, I'm a criminal defense attorney. No one's going to give him the greater presumption of innocence that I would. But we also have to speak truth, and we have to be able to say, ooh, those are some tough facts that his defense attorneys are going to have to overcome to obviously potentially save his life, or obviously it would be a miracle, so to speak, if he were to not get a not guilty based upon the information that we have thus far. Now, obviously, like all things in life, things can change, right? Let's say, for example, some motions were granted, like in the Luigi case, the Luigi Mangione case in New York today. The judge basically threw out a couple of charges. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but let's continue to talk about Mr. Tyler's case. All right. So the district attorney went through, and he had also introduced his team that'll be prosecuting the case. Obviously, very experienced prosecutors. I believe the prosecutor referred to them as his top prosecutors in the case. And the gentleman that was speaking today was the Utah County district attorney, Jeff Gray. And like I said, he held his press conference today. So the charges are first-degree murder, count 1, aggravated murder. Let me just start over. First charge is count 1, aggravated murder, capital felony, with the victim targeting enhancement based on political expression. Obviously, Charlie Kirk was out expressing his views, protected by the First Amendment. Count 2, felony discharge of a firearm causing serious bodily injury, right? That's just using a weapon in the commission of an offense. Count 3, commission of a violent offense in the presence of a child, third-degree felony. Count 4, obstruction of justice. Count 5, obstruction of justice. Count 6, witness tampering. Count 7, witness tampering. The obstruction of justice has to do with trying to get rid of the firearm as well as clothing. The witness tampering charges were when Mr. Robinson asked his roommate lover to delete the text messages and not to cooperate with the law enforcement in any way, and don't give any views. Let's see here. So, like I said, let's break it down a little further based upon the interview today. And if you'd like to watch that interview, we have it up. We brought it to you live today. But count 1, the defendant intentionally or knowingly caused the death of Charlie Kirk by discharging a high-powered bolt-action rifle from a rooftop approximately 300 yards away. This act created a great risk of death to others in the crowd of over 3,000 attendees, including children under 14 who were present and visible. An aggravating factor is that the murder was committed because of Kirk's political expression and beliefs, which Robinson targeted specifically. That is why the prosecutor, Mr. Gray, is also going to seek the death penalty in this particular case. Count 2, felony discharge of a firearm, obviously relates to the use of a firearm that resulted in the death of Charlie Kirk. Count 3, commission of a violent offense in the presence of a child, third-degree felony. The shooting occurred in view of minors at the event. Count 4, obstruction of justice. Alleges that on or about September 11th, Robinson attempted to hinder the investigation by providing false information to his family and law enforcement about his whereabouts and involvement. The prosecutor did state that at some point his family, Mr. Robinson's family, recognized him through the photographs that were put on the screen or out to the public to see. Originally, the wife, his mother, the mother of Mr. Robinson thought that was him. She asked her husband, "Do you look like that's him?" "Yeah." Then they showed a picture of the gun. Mom texted Mr. Robinson and said, "Where are you?" He's like, "Oh, I'm at home. Got that not feeling very well thing going on." And then Dad was like, "Hey, where's that rifle that Grandpa gave you?" And that's significant because there were some text messages between Mr. Robinson and his lover that he had the rifle, and oh my God, what am I going to do if I can't explain to my dad what I did with that rifle that was gifted to me, but apparently had a pretty good scope on it, worth about $2,000. So that's why that is significant. Witness tampering. Robinson attempted to influence his roommate with whom he was in a romantic relationship to withhold information from the authorities. Count 7, tampering. Attempts to coerce or dissuade potential witnesses post-shooting. These charges are based upon a thorough investigation by the county sheriff's office, Utah State Bureau of Investigation, and the FBI. They apparently received over 11,000 tips in the first 24 hours and 16,000 digital submissions. They also discussed a note left by Robinson under his keyboard at home, and it was discovered by his roommate on the day of the shooting. The note read, and I think one could probably take this as an admission, and I'm sure his defense attorneys are going to say that's not his handwriting, but I guarantee you they'll bring in handwriting experts, or the girlfriend, boyfriend will testify that that was his handwriting. The note read, "Well, I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." A photograph of this note was recovered by the police. "Look under my keyboard." Later messages confirmed his involvement. Robinson admitted he was the shooter and stated, quote, "I had enough of his hatred," end quote, referring to Charlie Kirk. He also mentioned planning the act for about a week and intended to retrieve his rifle, but he was being prevented because the campus was on lockdown and there was a police officer, positioned in the general area. He thought it would be better if he should have circled back immediately to try to get the rifle. Anyway, the rifle used in the shooting, a high-powered bolt action, was recovered from the wooded area near the scene. DNA on the trigger, ladies and gentlemen, trigger matches Mr. Robinson. Ammunition found at his residence included shell casings with etchings, such as phrases indicating premeditation and motive related to Kirk's political views. Surveillance footage and witness statements placing Robinson at the scene. His mother ID'd him from FBI released photos of the suspect on September 11th, leading to his surrender at the Washington County Sheriff's Office. And during questioning, Robinson initially lied, claiming he was homesick, but later confessed the elements of the crime to his parents. Robinson's family informed investigators that he had been more politically active in the recent years, leaning left and expressing strong opposition to Kirk's views on issues like transgender rights, immigration, and conservative politics. In one family conversation prior to the shooting, Robinson mentioned Kirk's upcoming university UVU event and discussed how much he disliked him. His mother reported that Robinson had accused Kirk of spreading too much hate. The district attorney said, "I do not take this decision lightly. The decision to file these charges and seek the death penalty for the aggravated murder count is mine alone, based solely on the evidence, the nature of the crime, and Utah law. Aggravated murder carries the possibility of execution, and given the premeditated targeting of a public figure for his political expression, the district attorney prosecutor believes that this warrants the maximum penalty." They believe that Robinson acted alone, but this was a calculated assassination. The prosecutor also noted that they collaborated with the FBI, Kash Patel, but this prosecution will proceed under state law. Robinson's next court appearance is going to be September 29th at 10 a.m. He will remain in custody without bail. A pretrial order has granted for Kirk's widow, Erica, and their family. That's pretty standard in any criminal case for a mandatory protection order to go into effect. Usually lists all named victims and or witnesses, and it says that you cannot harass, molest, intimidate, retaliate against anybody in that particular case. Don't attempt to intimidate witnesses. Now, I don't expect that to happen in this particular case from Mr. Robinson. I think he's going to be watched so heavily between now and the next court date. And whenever this matter gets resolved, he's not going to be having any contact with anybody except his attorneys. Probably be a little awkward conversation if he, what's the word I'm looking for? His parents visited him. Even his attorneys would probably tell him, don't talk to your mom and dad. They're probably going to say, and like any good attorney will say, they're dead to you. Okay. And guess what? They turned you in. They are going to be witnesses in your case. So it is best that you not talk with them. Now, there's talk that Mr. Robinson, is on suicide watch. He's in this little turtle suit, which is a little green tearaway thing with the little Velcro straps on the top. you know, padded room, all that good stuff. You don't want him to accidentally hurt himself, you know, when the cameras go off accidentally or anything like that. So they'll be watching him pretty darn close for sure. Let's talk about some of the text messages. I saw one guy, I think it was an ABC news reporter, doesn't talk about the pre-planning, the premeditation, the confession. He highlights the fact that he thought it was rather touching that Robinson was looking out for his roommate and didn't want him to get in any trouble. Okay, so let's kind of go through these. I think these text messages, and these were recovered, as my understanding, from the roommate. So, Robinson, I am still okay, my love, but am stuck in Orem for a little while longer yet. Shouldn't be long until I can come home, but I got to grab my rifle still. To be honest, I had hoped to keep this secret till I died of old age. I'm sorry to involve you. Roommate, you weren't the one who did it, right? Robinson, I am. I'm sorry. Roommate, I thought they caught the person. Robinson, no, they grabbed some crazy old dude, then interrogated someone in similar clothing. I had planned to grab my rifle from my drop point shortly after, but most of that side of town got locked down. It's quiet, almost enough to get out, but there's one vehicle lingering. So clearly he's trying to get back to the firearm, but the cop is sitting there and he can't do it. Now, it's also funny. Our dumb criminal of the day in our daily episode was Mr. Zinn, I think is his name, who literally admitted and is charged with felonies for his basically obstruction of the police, saying that he did it and his intent was to act as a disguise, so to speak, so the other guy could get away. The real shooter could get away. Well, it turns out, you know, everybody and their brother in law enforcement, when they arrested him, well, they looked at his phone. Now, whether it was consensual via search warrant, we don't know yet. I'm sure there'll be a challenge to that. But apparently, that old dude, 71-year-old Mr. Zinn, he got charged with having child exploitive materials on his phone. For those of you who don't know the new terminology when it comes to child sexual exploitive material, they don't say kiddie porn anymore, but that's what it is. It's kiddie porn. So Mr. Zinn, the guy who thought he was trying to help out Mr. Robinson, even though he never met him, never knew anything about it, just thought it'd be cool to claim he did it. Yeah, they looked at his phone. I bet Mr. Zinn is probably regretting that decision right now. Hence the reason why he was our dumb criminal of the day. All right, back to the text message. Roommate, why? Referring to why he did it. Robinson, why did I do it? Roommate, yeah. Robinson, I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out. If I am able to grab my rifle unseen, I will have left no evidence. Going to attempt to retrieve it again. Hopefully they have moved on. I haven't seen anything about them finding it. Roommate, how long have you been planning this? A bit over a week. I can get close to it, but there's a squad car parked right by it. I think they already swept that spot, but I don't want to change it, or I don't want to chance it. Robinson, I'm wishing I had circled back and grabbed it as soon as I got my vehicle. I'm worried what my old man would do if I didn't bring back Grandpa's rifle. I don't know if it had a serial number, but it wouldn't trace to me. I worry about my prints. I had to leave it in a bush where I changed outfits. Didn't have the ability or time to bring it with. I might have to abandon it and hope they don't find prints. How the blank will I explain losing it to my old man? Only thing I left was the rifle wrapped in a towel. Remember how I was engraving bullets? The blank messages are mostly a big meme. If I see notices bulge UW on Fox News, I might have a stroke. All right, I'm going to have to leave it. That really effing sucks. Judging from today, I'd say Grandpa's gun does just fine. I don't know. I think that was a 2K scope, referring to $2,000 scope. Robinson, delete this exchange. Robinson, my dad wants photos of the rifle. He says Grandpa wants to know who has what. The feds released a photo of the rifle, and it's very unique. He's calling me right now, not answering. Robinson, since Trump got into office, my dad has been a pretty diehard MAGA. Robinson, I'm going to turn myself in willingly. One of my neighbors here is the deputy for the sheriff. Robinson, you are all I worry about, love. Roommate, I'm much more worried about you. Robinson, don't talk to the media, please. Don't take any interviews or make any comments. If any police ask you questions, ask for a lawyer and stay silent. Assuming that can get into evidence, which I believe it can, since the roommate is completely cooperating against Mr. Robinson, that sounds like a confession to me, does it not, ladies and gentlemen? I mean, I guess the defense could always argue, well, how do we really know that was Mr. Robinson on the other end of the line? You know, he could just be a big patsy in this entire thing. No, not going to fly, ladies and gentlemen. His DNA is at the crime scene on the trigger, for God's sakes. Now, of course, we will have lots of people, and don't understand. I mean, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I will come up with an argument for just about anything. But here we like to keep it real. We don't like to just make ridiculous statements that we, basically wouldn't get up in front of a jury with a straight face to make. Now, we noticed when we talked about the Kohberger case, some people like to ignore facts a lot, and they like to ignore DNA, but they can't. I'm sure somebody will say, but it was only trace DNA on the finger, on the trigger from his finger, right? Probably have fingerprints as well, possibly. Definitely DNA, right? Probably he was sweating like a little pig up there on that building top right before he pulled the trigger. But it doesn't matter. It's his DNA, right? One of the things that the prosecution has to prove is identity in any criminal case. And they have video of him walking with what they believe to be the rifle stuffed down his pants, walking with a stiff leg on his right leg. And they have video up top. They have video below. And they have his DNA at the scene. Apparently, there's also some DNA on the towel itself. Once again, not good, right? Let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen. DNA is not good in a situation like this. Now, I guess one could also say, well, of course there's going to be DNA on that rifle because it was a gift from his grandfather. And who knows when that DNA got there and under what circumstances, right? I get it. I would ask those questions, of course, if I was representing Mr. Robinson, but I'm not. So let's be realistic. That helps prove identity. Then you also have the admissions by a party opponent, a confession. Obviously, the jury would have to decide what weight they would give that alleged confession. But don't forget, there's more. There's also confessions to his parents. So, if his parents decided to take a world trip between now and his next court date because they didn't want to testify against their son, I guess that confession wouldn't come in, would it? If something terrible happened to the roommate, they would not be able to get that evidence in either. They would have to lay the foundation that it came from his phone, which they would be able to do. Don't get me wrong. Because they'd be able to show identifying information. And I guarantee you no judge is going to keep that out if all the witnesses, got hit by a big bus. Not that we're suggesting any of that, I assure you. But, sometimes, as a defense attorney, you joke around that we need all the witnesses to disappear. And that usually doesn't work. And obviously you never, ever want a client to do anything to tamper with a witness or intimidate a witness in any way whatsoever. That is a very serious crime, and you certainly don't want to harm them in any way whatsoever. So, got got multiple confessions, right, to the boyfriend. You got confessions to mom and dad and a deputy sheriff that was the friend, right? And apparently there may have been some confessions online as well, but that has not been confirmed. So needless to say, not exactly going to be a who done it. Obviously, they know what the offense is. They got the identification, they know the date and the time, all the essential elements of the offense. They bring in a witness, probably the widow of Charlie Kirk, Erica, to say, oh, no, by the way, were your children there when your father was shot in the neck, dead? Yes, they were. Yeah. And there were 3,000 people there. Is it, could somebody have fired it and hit a round and the round hit somebody else as a ricochet or, going through and hitting somebody else? Absolutely. There are those aggravating factors. They're also going to prove the identification of the gun, right? Bring in the dad or the grandfather. That where'd you get that gun from? Well, my dad, the grandfather, gave it to Mr. Robinson. Pretty simple case. They could probably try this case in the next 90 days, 6 months, to be honest with you. But that's not going to happen. So what is really going to happen? Well, there's going to be lots and lots of evaluations. I would be surprised if this trial got to trial within the next year, probably 2 years. Okay. But even though it's going to be a death penalty case and they're going to bring in the death penalty lawyers, and what have we said about death penalty lawyers, right? Their only job is to try and do what they can to present mitigation. Usually, like in a case like this, I think one could say it's a slam dunk. Now, there's never a guarantee that every trial is going to win. Remember, prosecutors are supposed to win. They have all the good facts. They have all the resources of the government coming to their rescue. But remember, the prosecution loses cases. It happens on a daily basis in courthouses all across the country where the government couldn't prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, I don't know any of the prosecutors in this particular case, but from what I saw at the press conference, they seem like some pretty competent guys. Now, could I be fooled? Yeah, probably, but those career prosecutor guys like that are usually pretty good. They're going to dot every I, cross every T, and obviously it's going to be a litigation battle as it relates to the death penalty. The prosecutor said, you know what, we're moving forward. We have 60 days in which to file the notice of intent to seek the death penalty, but I'm going to just go ahead and file it later today. He's a man on a mission. He is going to make sure that that takes place. Now, whether the jury ultimately imposes the ultimate sentence, we'll all have to wait and see. One could argue that, they only got to have one juror say, nope, I feel really bad. I mean, what if you do? You get your parents, turn him in, right? And what if they get up there and say, save my baby? He was radicalized when he found his sexuality and started hanging out with this, group of people, and they radicalized him. I mean, this is going to be interesting to watch the defense. The defense is going to throw all of Mr. Robinson's friends and not friends under the bus. Now, remember, there were lots of posts online where people were saying that, oh, look, Charlie Kirk is coming to our school today. Something big is going to happen. Oh, it just happened, right? So the question is did those people know something? I would imagine the defense will actually help make the case for the prosecution of others' involvement or encouragement or radicalization of the young Mr. Tyler Robinson. Because apparently, for all we knew, grew up in a good family, 2 parents, 2 brothers, and a brother and a sister, I believe, and good student, gets a scholarship. Some reason goes off to school after a year, decides this isn't for me, and enrolls in an electrical program. I think he was also studying like engineering or something while he was in school. Be interesting to figure out what happened there, why he didn't go back. I haven't seen a whole lot of reports. Maybe somebody knows. But, the mitigation is going to be what happened at school, right? This guy's on on the straight and narrow path. Everything's going really well. And then he just drops out of school when he has a scholarship to go to college. And obviously being an electrician pays really well. Great trade. A lot of those things are obviously very, very good. Good money, good skill to have. I wish I knew a little electrician work every now and then when you're trying to do something around the house. But that's his choice. Then, of course, he meets his what's the word I'm looking for? His boyfriend, who is apparently transitioning to be a female. And we won't even get into those political arguments at all. But that person is going to be a big witness, not only for the prosecution, but the defense. He may be a key player in any mitigation that the defense has to prepare. Now, remember, just like we saw in the Kohberger case, the defense will do all their testing. I guarantee you, they're getting all kinds of doctors lined up as we speak right at this very moment. The defense attorneys have probably already made their initial interview with him, they're going to get school records, and they're going to get everything. They're going to do all sorts of evaluations, just like we saw in the Brian Kohberger case, and they're going to try and do what they can to create something that'll say, you won't be able to kill this guy. Why don't you give us life without parole? Because that's the role of a death penalty attorney. And I hate to say it. And I've said this before. I've only done one case that was going to go death in my 30 years of practicing law. And they said, hey, we're going to go death. And between the time that they did that and the time that they were going to, formally file it, we said, don't do anything yet. We're working on this great mitigation. We presented great mitigation, and they decided, yes, we're not going to go death on this particular case. And then we went to trial and, promptly convicted my clients of a double homicide and a horrible sexual assault. Of course, they got his DNA in this cold case from his other murder conviction in another jurisdiction. So that's my experience with my death penalty. But I know lots of people that did death penalty work here in the state of Colorado until the legislature and the governor signed the law revoking the death penalty. So we don't have to worry about it here in the state of Colorado. I've also mentioned that I think it's a shame that it went away, and not necessarily because I, think it's right or wrong or anything along those lines. Those opinions don't really matter. But I think it took a tool away from the prosecutors, right? It's a bargaining chip. Suddenly things get very real for defendants when they're talking about the death penalty. All right. And suddenly people that didn't have a whole lot of regard for human life suddenly don't want theirs taken away. And oftentimes that's what will lead to a disposition in a case where they're going to go death, which is just like in the Kohberger case. Let my client plead guilty to everything. He'll go to prison for the rest of his life. He'll never get out. And you don't have to deal with appeals for the next 20 to 30 years. If this, so take the deal. And that's a tool that the prosecutors have taken away from them here, at least in the state in which I practice law. But that's what they're going to be trying to do. They're going to come up with anything. They're going to say he was put under this hypnosis, this spell. They're going to try to come up with a mental defense, NGRI. He was in psychosis, something along those lines, whereby he just couldn't rationalize. Now, I think based upon what we've seen, based upon these text messages, that won't fly. Or as they say in some parts of the country, that dog don't hunt. Okay. I don't think that'll work. What's the defense going to do then? Well, they're going to have to file motions, lots and lots of motions. All right. But this is not a complex case, ladies and gentlemen. In all honesty, this case from start to finish, even with the death penalty on the table, I would say start to finish 1 year. That seems reasonable to me. The Kohberger thing dragged on and on and on. The defense is going to say, there's so much discovery. There's so many leads, right? Because the prosecutor said, I think they had 12,000 leads or whatever. And the defense is like, well, we got to go check it out. We got to go see if there's some alternate suspect out there. We got to check it out to, make sure we're effective assistance of counsel for Mr. Robinson. I'm just telling you what it's probably going to happen, right? But it's going to come down to mitigation. So the roommate's going to be a mitigation. The defense is literally going to have to prove that this guy was put under a spell by all of his friends or not friends on Discord and people associated with the, I think I saw something that he attended several meetings of a organization, which is basically to arm transgender people. And, who knows what influence that may have had, if any. Maybe he read the stuff. But at the end of the day, that's not going to be a legitimate defense as it relates to murder, aggravated murder. Okay. And, assuming for the sake of argument here, because he's entitled to the presumption of innocence, if he gets convicted, can you imagine the people that would come in for the prosecution in the penalty phase to talk about Charlie Kirk? I mean, you'd have famous people. Heck, you could bring the president in. You could bring in half of his cabinet that worked with Charlie Kirk, right? And say, he's a great guy. The world's been effective. And let's not forget his wife, Erica. And Charlie Kirk was pretty adamant. Obviously, if you're like me, I'd heard of Charlie Kirk. I'd seen some of his videos, but I didn't know that much about him. I think I've watched, it feels like just about every video out there. And it was rather interesting because people kept calling him such nasty names and things of that nature. And not one video that I ever watched did he ever be rude, insult somebody. I think the worst I think I saw was he told somebody, you need to go study up a little more and come back and try again, do better next time because your argument was terrible. But he wasn't disrespectful. And then you see all the people of various races that say, Charlie got me my start, whether it's in politics or on what's the other, and as it relates to starting their own, podcasts and things of that nature. And there's no way that, Charlie Kirk was a racist. So it's rather interesting to me what video I always think. So I've kind of been looking and like, okay, where's the video where he's, racist, homophobic. He said he didn't care if people were homosexuals. He didn't care. He said he thought religiously, marriage should be between a man and a woman, but hey, you do you, right? That's what I saw him say. So I'm just kind of, I guess they could say, there's, as a defense attorney, sometimes you make jokes. Sometimes, they're a little dark because, if what you see on a daily basis, if you didn't laugh about it, maybe sometimes you would probably cry. When you do it 30 years, you see lots of things, right? I just did a trial a couple of weeks ago. The murder was on video. I don't know how many murders on video that I've seen, even just in the last 10 years, where video has become so prevalent in criminal cases. But there was something about this one, it wasn't a fight. It wasn't an altercation. It wasn't a bunch of street thugs battling it out or anything like that. Here's a guy up there on stage expressing his views, being polite, basically saying, bring me your best shot. Convince me I'm wrong. Convince me I'm wrong. Oftentimes, what we do here when we have an open line, say, call me. For example, I would say, if you thought Brian Kohberger was innocent, you got first call in priority. And no one ever called in. Now, some people obviously approached Charlie Kirk, talked to him. He got lots of threats. But I'm not seeing, like I said, I'm not familiar with any video. And if somebody has one, send it to me. I mean, if you think, I just haven't seen it. Everything I've seen has been, he's been polite. He's been a debater. And usually he was kicking people's butts when he was debating them because they just didn't know. Apparently Charlie Kirk had literally like one of those people with photographic memory. He could read it and he would always be able to remember it and recall it. That's probably why he was such a good debater. So, imagine his wife getting up there as well to say how he's been affected, how this has affected the family, the kids. And Charlie Kirk was very adamant that if somebody killed somebody, they should get the death penalty, because if you didn't get the death penalty, it minimized the human life of the person that was killed. So it'll be interesting to see. And it'll be interesting to see because obviously the ultimate decision is on the prosecutor, just like we saw in the Kohberger case, to make a decision whether they want to, make a deal, life without possibility of parole. Would the Kirk family show some grace and say, save him, he's a young man, punish him by making him listen to Charlie Kirk videos, 10 hours a day, for the rest of his time in custody, something along those lines? I don't know. It's still too early. I think it's still too raw for the victims, obviously, in the case, and lots of people that knew Mr. Kirk, no doubt. But I can tell you, the defense will try to delay this and drag it out as long as possible, unless they're going to get some sort of quick life without the possibility of parole type of thing. They will drag this out as long as they can. So hopefully, feelings and people kind of work through the grief and things of that nature. So we'll see. We'll see. All right, let's before we get to taking a couple of calls, let's move on to Luigi Mangione. Luigi Mangione, obviously, also charged with murder. Now it's only second-degree murder because the murder with terroristic threats was thrown out today by the judge. I thought that was a very interesting ruling that the judge made, and said there wasn't sufficient evidence that was presented, that would support the charge. Now, remember, I'd be surprised if the prosecution did not appeal that to a higher court. Now, remember, the trial courts in the state of New York start out as the Supreme Court, and then they go up to the appellate courts from there. So the Supreme Court, the district court, the trial court threw out the charges. So now the charge of second-degree murder plus all the crimes of violence and weapons offenses are still there. He could still get life in prison, but he would have a possibility of parole. The court saying, well, sure, there's a lot of planning. Sure, he was just kind of making a statement, but this doesn't really fit the definition of terrorism under the statute, and therefore we're going to throw out those two charges. Very surprising to me that a judge would do that at this stage of the proceedings. Most judges will say, that's a question of fact. Normally at this stage of the proceedings, the facts must be viewed in the light most favorable to the prosecution, and viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the prosecution. And that's a question for the jury to decide, and it's not the judge's job. Obviously, here is deciding legal issues, But, it only takes probable cause for the charges to get filed. And that's the legal standard throughout the process until it finally gets submitted to the jury. And then it goes to proof beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest form of proof known to the law. And the jury could say, you know what? Not guilty. We just don't think that meets the definition of that. But that's a question of fact normally in most of these cases. So once again, I'm very surprised that the judge did it. But Luigi Mangione had a very big day in court. Now, he still got other problems. He still got the case in Pennsylvania when he was arrested. Frankly, that's the least of his concern. And then he's got the federal terrorism charges carrying the potential death penalty as well. Now, we'll see who shows up for Mr. Robinson in court. Luigi Mangione, he's got his fan club. He's got fans paying $1.2 million towards his legal defense fund. It'll be interesting to see if somebody pays for Mr. Robinson's legal defense fund or if he's going to have the public defender throughout these proceedings. It'll be interesting to see if people show up, support Mr. Robinson in the court system, start writing him love letters, or is it maybe he doesn't fit the profile of an Ivy League educated man that apparently is so enlightened he thinks the best way to make his political statement was to kill a CEO of a major corporation. But he looks like he looks great with his shirt off. Whereas the case in Utah with Mr. Robinson, right? We got a gay guy that's a blue collar worker doing electrical work, but apparently is on a mission as well. It'll be curious to see, although with some of the backlash that a lot of people have had, it's showing their exuberance for the death of Mr. Kirk. I think that may slow down just a little bit. I guess it's easy to, if you don't like the healthcare system, you can get behind that, I guess. Makes no sense to me. Usually when you shoot people in the back at close range, well, they call that murder. All right. And when it's on video, they call that murder. Like I said, I did a trial. Gosh, was it 3 weeks ago? Seems like longer, maybe a month. On video, fight in the back, dead. Jury said murder rather quickly. So, in anywhere other than New York, it's murder in the first degree, cold-blooded. You can't do that. Can't shoot people in the back. It's not self-defense, right? Remember, you only have a couple of defenses when it comes to murder. One, you can say it wasn't you. You got the wrong guy, didn't do it. That's why they have to establish identification, right? Obviously, they have the gun. They have the little memoir. They got video of Luigi Mangione, all those types of things. Same thing with Mr. Robinson. They got the DNA. They got the gun. They got the confession, etc. Identity. So don't have to worry about a general denial offense when it comes to that. Then you say, well, self-defense. Well, you can only use, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah. You can only use self-defense if there is, in fact, a reasonable fear of death or serious bodily injury. Reasonable death, fear of death. And when somebody is unarmed, then that is obviously not a defense, so to speak. So that's where we stand on that, okay? And then the other defense would be maybe like a heat of passion, something along those lines. Well, I did it, but it was a heat of passion. But those are usually, I've given you an example. You walk in, you find your spouse or significant other in bed with somebody else, and you lose control and you hurt somebody badly or kill them, right? Then you got mental health defenses, not guilty by reason of insanity, the devil made me do it, the demons made me do it, things along those lines. So not a whole lot of options there to go along with that. So, all right, Frank, the man behind the camera here and also controls the keyboard, says we have a caller. Who do we have, Frank? Amy, you're on the air.
Hi, Scott. Yeah, I'm Amy, and my question is concerning the influence of social media. And do you think there will be a case where the social media will go on trial for influencing these killers?
No, it's not. I mean, it's just a different form of communication. I mean, I've said this before and I'll say it again. All of the problems that we deal with in today's world, they're nothing new. They've been dealing with them forever. When the printing press was discovered, people were leery of the printing press. Newspapers, oh my gosh, they're going to be, used to influence and spread their propaganda. When TV came on, it was going to ruin a generation, right? Now it's just social media. I'm sure there will be something next as well. But I don't think they're going to put social media on trial. I think what they're going to do is they're going to show the dark side of social media. But the defense will probably have a problem trying to get a lot of that information in, unless maybe they have an expert witness to show, like, from the fact that Mr. Robinson would be, somehow radicalized, or he was pushed into doing it or encouraged to do it. That's the type of thing that they were looking at. But I mean, it's funny. I've seen interviews. People, like Steve Jobs, right? Created the iPad, the iPhones, things of that nature. Zuckerberg even apparently limits his children's access to social media. I mean, I'm sure everyone has kids, grandkids, whatever, or people have been bullied, people that have been depressed because they didn't get enough likes on their social media. There's always something that goes on there, and it affects people. But is it going to go away? No, I think it's the parents' responsibility. And if you're over 18, you've got your own responsibility to, turn the phone over, put it away, do whatever you need to do so it doesn't control your life, because you control your phone, not the phone controlling you. Does that answer your question?
Thanks, Scott.
All right.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks for calling in. All right, let me see. We've got some questions over here as well. Kelly, only a coward would off a soft target so senseless. I mean, think about it, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, whether it's a school shooting event or something along the lines like this, as it relates to Charlie Kirk's assassination, they're not going to do it in a fair fight. They always look for a weak target. They knew where he was going to be. They knew he was going to be armed. It's very, very, they always look for soft targets, particularly, school shooters, cowards. When was the last time somebody went into a gun store and tried to rob it during daylight hours? It wouldn't happen. Why? Because everybody in there that works there is armed to the teeth. They all have a gun on their side. They're not going to do that. When was the last time somebody went to the police station to try to shoot it up? They don't. Why? Because there's people that are going to shoot back. These people are cowards, ladies and gentlemen. They look for soft targets. I've said this before. In my practice, I've talked to lots of clients over the years. Like, what did you look for when you were going to rob the place? Oh, no cameras. It was dark. Didn't look like anybody was there. Soft target, right? Maybe a broken window, windows open, something along those lines. What did you think you were going to do before you sexually assaulted somebody? Oh, they had their hands full. They were distracted. They look like, small in size, petite in size. I could take them, right? They don't go after people that they think they're going to put up a fight. They don't do that, ladies and gentlemen. They simply do not do that. Let's see. Let's see here. It scares the hell out of me that 90% of my kids' friends, age 10 to 13, have phones and unlimited social media access. This generation is mostly unparented in that area. And I'm not sure. Is it Kainos? Kainos. I can't necessarily disagree with you. Go to a restaurant where there's family. What do? I remember when my kids were young. It was a long time ago. But you would go to dinner and it would be like a tag team match because you didn't have, it's like, oh, here's some Cheerios, here's some noodles, play with it, right? And now you go dinner and there's kids there. Parents get to eat their meal in complete harmony. It's perfect for them because they put an iPad in front of the kid and say, watch this. Don't get me wrong. I'm guilty. I remember having to play videos in cars, like we're going to have a nice trip. We're going to keep everybody fine. We're going to occupy them time. I get it. It's an easy babysitter. I truly do. But the stuff that kids are exposed to these days, unless you have some sort of parental control on your kids' phones, it's scary what they can find. They could go watch murders online over and over and over again and watch it, potentially desensitizing them to all of that type of stuff. So yeah, it is great. It is it's scary out there. I'm not going to lie. Really, it's crazy. All right. Frank says we have another call. Who do we have, Frank? No name caller. Who do we have?
Hello?
Hello, you're on the air. Who do we have?
Hi, this is Heather.
Good evening, Heather. Where are you calling from? Houston. I have friends in Houston. How's the weather? Is it hot and muggy or rainy and muggy?
Hot. Yes, it's hot. Very hot.
All right. What's on your mind?
So I'm just curious, and I've had this question about other cases also. Would you take this case if it were presented to you?
Sure. I would as a defense attorney, you have an obligation to represent people, and you do not always get to pick and choose your cases. Now, could one turn it down? Sure. Obviously I can say that easily because I'm not going to get this case, right? I'm not licensed in Utah. Parents aren't going to come hire me. I'm sure I'd take it, right? But it would be tough. It would be tough, and it's a tough case to take for anybody. They're going to be run through the muck. The defense attorneys will be. Hopefully they're respectful to all. I know they will be. Hopefully people are respectful to the defense attorneys. They are doing a job that they are required to do. And if you saw the press conference by the prosecutor, Mr. Gray, he said, he's a prosecutor. He believes in the system, the, rights afforded to the defendant, meeting their burden of proof, and they wouldn't have it any other way. That's the way the system works. It makes it credible that people have challenged it, the evidence that is, and that obviously if there's a conviction that somebody had a defense. It wasn't just a complete railroad job. But this particular case, the defense attorneys, they got a tough road ahead. They're going to have to get super, super creative. But a lot of it, like most cases, go ahead.
What just off the top of your head, what would your first defense be? Would you try they don't have it in Utah, but would you try to go for some sort of mental state?
Well, I think that's all you have to do. The evidence so far, and obviously, my opinion could change, but based upon what we have seen so far, this is, it's not exactly a whodunit at this point. If people believe the confession, the gun, the DNA, the note, online confessions allegedly as well. That's tough, right?
The photos.
And what other defense could you do? Well, I only wanted to graze him or scare him. I didn't mean to kill him. It was an accident. Maybe you could make that particular argument. That'd be a little rough to do, particularly given the fact that the notes are there. I really think this is going to come down to groveling by the defense to the prosecutors to try to get them to agree to some sort of life without the possibility of parole. I think that's what it's going to come down to. I mean, obviously you'd have to explore everything. Like I said, I think you'd have, but it's more of a mitigation argument. It's not a defense. The whole, he was radicalized. You basically have to unbrainwash him, if that's the right word I'm using, de-brainwash him.
Right.
And, be like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Oh my goodness. There's going to have to be something along those lines. Now, this is obviously early in the case, but unless there's some sort of mental health issue like schizophrenia that you can actually document, which doesn't sound like it, other than, schizophrenia usually comes on in young men, but there's no indication of that. The guy could hold a job. He was working. He was coherent. He wasn't saying, the voices told me to do it kind of thing. It was, no, I wanted to do it because this guy, I thought he was evil. The defense attorneys have a tough road to hoe on this one. They really, really do.
Yeah.
And
can I ask another question?
Sure, go ahead.
So you said that as criminal defense attorneys, you're kind of obligated to take cases. Mm-hmm. Correct? Is that
correct? Unless you have a conflict.
Could you have a conflict based on, you just really don't want to take the case because you think they're guilty? I mean, or you just don't have.
It depends. I used to get referred a lot of cases from a gentleman years ago. He would take somebody that was accused of possession of drugs. He would represent them, but he would not represent drug dealers because his child had been addicted to drugs and he couldn't do it. So he turned down all of those cases and said, let me refer you to somebody that does. I don't take those cases. And, he was polite about it. He didn't give any reason why. But yes, I mean, if you believe that, hey, this isn't the right case for me, so you can back out of it. If you don't think that you can
turn down cases.
Yeah.
Personal.
Correct. Yeah. For personal reasons.
It doesn't have to be like they're not going to pay me enough or
they
can't afford me.
Yeah. I mean, and as a private attorney, you can do that. But let's say the court asks you to represent them. There's a conflict with the public defender's office or, the public defender's overworked and they say, hey, we're going to appoint you to do this case. Right. We still take court appointed cases. Most of them are usually homicides. Or very serious type of cases. I don't really want to do the little small, he sold the $20 worth of crack, to an undercover officer. I don't want to do those type of cases. But the bigger ones will still do that. Now, I can certainly turn them down, but I don't think I've ever turned down a case that says, ooh, it's too bad, or it's, you can be seen. I mean, I've received death threats over the years. People called the office. How could you represent, somebody like that? Usually it was like on a dead baby case. And I know friends that turn down cases all the time. But I'm of the mindset that everybody's entitled to a defense. And, if everybody gets a free pass and says, oh, I don't want to do it because it's too ugly, then who's going to represent everybody? Right. I mean, I truly believe as a defense attorney, your job is to represent, and you're not condoning what the client did allegedly, or if maybe they did in fact do it and they tell you they do it. It doesn't mean that they're not entitled to a zealous defense. That's the way the system works. I've had clients that have been guilty as sin on video. Client wants his day in court. Let's go. You do what you can. You try not to look too silly in front of a jury, but everybody's entitled to their day in court, even if they're absolutely guilty as sin. It's a long guilty plea,
Right.
you know?
Well, I know you have a difficult job as a criminal defense attorney because, you do get a lot of hate from either
Oh,
side.
yeah.
And people,
You know,
you get a bad rap. People,
yeah.
but you're upholding Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken about this before. I mean, a criminal defense attorney, he does not necessarily condone what his client did. All right. But you're protecting everybody's constitutional rights, because if we roll over and let the government railroad guilty people, guess what? They'll start doing it to innocent people as well. And so, the only thing that really stands in between the government completely trampling everybody's rights, for the most part, it's criminal defense attorneys in the trenches, whether it be public defenders, court-appointed counsel, retained counsel, standing up and saying, I don't care if it's the United States government versus the defendant or the state of blank, fill in the state blank, and all the resources that come with it. My job is here to say, you can't do that, or you did that wrong. You did that illegally. You can't prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, if the prosecution can prove their case, obviously a jury's going to, it's their legal and ethical obligation, moral obligation, to find, the defendant guilty. And if they're not satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's the legal standard, beyond a reasonable doubt, then they should find the defendant not guilty. That's the way the standard works. It works throughout courthouses every day in courts across the country. Juries say not guilty, even though the prosecution thought we had a great case. Maybe a witness said something a little differently. Maybe the evidence couldn't come in. Maybe it was interpreted a little differently than what they thought it was when they read the reports 10,000 times, right? It just depends. But this one, you got very experienced prosecutors. They're going to do everything by the book. I mean, there's no reason to try to cheat, so to speak. Not that the government should ever cheat when it comes to somebody's liberty, but there's no reason to do anything nefarious. It's a pretty straightforward case. Any prosecutor could say, hey, let's go try this case within 6 months. That ought to give the defense enough time to look into it, review the discovery, engage in motions practice, consult with experts, and, sufficient time in which to present mitigation. It's not that complicated. I mean, if you watched the video today, we have it. You can always go to it today, but it was the news conference of the prosecutor. He gave their opening statement today. He's ready to go try this case. Other than, getting all the witnesses there on time for a trial, he could go try this case. Give him a week. He'd be ready to go. Obviously, the defense wouldn't be, but it's not that complicated of a case. It's not a whodunit. Identity's been pretty much proven so far, or will be in court, and it has to be with legal and competent evidence. Obviously, he caused the death of Charlie Kirk, and it's we'll see what a jury does. I think they will. If I had to, if I was on the jury now, obviously you'd have to hear the evidence, but they're probably going to find him guilty, Mr. Robinson guilty. So, and it is a tough job. I mean, and here's the thing. I've represented many a client that I found absolutely horrible, right? We weren't going to be friends. We weren't going to be inviting each other over for, dinner, the holidays, anything along those lines. They probably hated me as much as I hated them, but I still fought tooth and nail for them. And at the end of it, even had a couple of them say thank you, because they could tell that I was fighting for them. Even though I found, whether I despised them as a human being or what they did, I despised. My job, I have to turn that off and focus on representing the client and protecting their rights. That's it.
And I don't think what a lot of people understand, and I learned this from my brother, who's an attorney, and I went to paralegal school, but people don't understand that a lot of what criminal defense attorneys are doing is they're protecting that one person who's innocent.
Yeah.
That gets convicted, that could get convicted. And sometimes, like my brother said, sometimes you have to let a few bad people go to protect the one person.
Yeah.
The death penalty that may not be guilty of it, because there's a lot of people out there that, get thrown in jail and they weren't even guilty. So that's a big part of what I think most criminal defense attorneys do. And one more question, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
I think a lot of people, this is a moment of education for the public here. Could you explain how public defenders are assigned, where they come from? I think a lot of people think they're paid for they are paid for by the government, but don't attorneys have to do a certain amount of hours in public defense?
No, not at all. So, obviously, what's the word I'm looking for? The public defender obviously represents most individuals, okay, that are in custody. If you're in custody, you're entitled to a public defender. Gideon v. Wainwright was the seminal court decision from the United States Supreme Court. I think it was in 1961 or 1963. Mr. Gideon was in a Florida cell down in Florida and wanted an attorney, and he couldn't get one. So he wrote a pro se petition by hand to the United States Supreme Court. They took the case up. Ultimately, they said, if you're indigent and you're in custody, you have a right to an attorney. So public defenders get that. Now, when they have a conflict, right, if there's multi-co-defendants or there's some ethical conflict that arises, the public defender's office then turns it over to private counsel. Some states have different systems set up. The federal system has a system set up. It's called the Criminal Justice Act panel. And, they're usually quite experienced attorneys. Same thing in state courts. We have one here in the state court. You have to apply to get on it. You're approved. You have to do, cases, etc. And, very experienced attorneys for the most part. Some younger ones, but they start off doing, county court cases and things of that nature. And, I got a federal case right now, by the court, very serious charges. There's 4 or 5 co-defendants on there, and the least amount of experience is probably about 25 years of experience from each of the attorneys. That's the least experienced one. And one of the attorneys was a very accomplished death penalty attorney. Great guy, great attorney. And so obviously he's there, and you get paid, but it's hardly anything near your normal hourly rate. It's at a reduced rate. But
I was going to ask how does it compare to what you would normally get?
It's usually about, 25% of what your normal hourly rate is. But they're usually interesting cases, right? They're usually interesting cases because for the most part, if somebody goes off and commits a heinous crime, they're not going to have the resources to go hire private counsel. It doesn't happen that often. Okay. We've had lots of murder cases over the years where we've been retained. But by the end of it, everybody's usually out of money because they are so expensive to do. When you start hiring experts and things of that nature, sometimes it's better to keep your court-appointed counsel because you can get the experts you need. Take a look at the Koberger case, right? They had an endless pot of money that was approved by the judge saying, yep, it's necessary. It's a death penalty case, right? And so, it works out. But I've had potential clients, ask me, hey, I want to hire you for a homicide case, something along those lines. And you have to tell them, man, you've got good counsel, whether it be at the public defender's office or a private attorney that was appointed towards you. Like, I'll be more than happy to come on, but I'm going to need, this amount of retainer, which they usually don't have. They want to make a payment plan. Like, no, it really doesn't work that way. Not in a case like this. And, I tell them, save your money. Save your money. You got a good attorney. It's a state expense. Okay. And somebody gonna, I guarantee you, somewhere in Utah, whether it is through their public defender system or a private attorney, they're looking for somebody that's super experienced, right? They're not going to give this guy, the first guy out of law school. And contrary to common belief, nobody has to do pro bono work or gets court appointed. Maybe in a really small town, that could happen, but not in a big city. You're going to have people that specialize in the area of criminal law that will represent somebody. Like I said, maybe in a small town, if they really needed somebody, they could do that. And then, the judge would say, hey, would you take this case? And they could do that. But if somebody has no experience doing criminal law, I mean, you're setting up an ineffective assistance of counsel claim. So
Right.
you don't want to do that. I mean, I've been, I've been asked to take case. I remember I had a case years ago. It was a double dead baby case. And I say dead child case. It was on the other side of the state. Had already got a lot of headlines, had to do a bunch of stuff with like cults and things of that nature. And they thought the world was going to come to an end. And, everybody thought it was like all voodoo, stuff or whatever. And my first thought was, well, that sounds interesting. I like challenging cases, right? Give me the case that nobody else wants. I'll go do something with it. In all honesty, I love those type of cases because you can get creative.
You volunteer for the pro bono work.
Oh, no. I still get paid.
Get paid
I'll get paid at a reduced rate through the state or federal courts.
No, that's not what I meant. I mean, I know you're getting paid something.
Yeah.
But you have put yourself out there to be part of the pool.
Correct. Yep. And you say, hey,
attorneys have to do that.
You say, hey, I'm in, give me the worst of the worst.
But all attorneys don't have to do that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I will leave it at that. And
All
I
right.
just want to say thank you for your service.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for the call. Good call. Thank you.
Service in the military. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right. I'm looking here at, it was a good call. Let's see here if there's any questions that jump out at me. Now, we don't ask for super chats, but I'll be honest with you, it helps them highlight. So you probably would more than likely get them answered because I'm not going to do that. But who did I dislike? Proctor? Scott disliked them so much he would not even give them a key ring, and he has millions of them. Who is that? I don't understand. That's interesting. Who did I hate so much that I wouldn't give a key ring? We do have lots of key rings. From CrimeCon left over. I don't know, showed these to people the other day. Frank's working on getting it set up on the website. There was a lady yesterday, Frank. Did she email you? I sent you a text message last night. She said she was retired on a fixed income and couldn't afford anything. And I said, well, email Frank and we'll get you a keychain because I'm a big softie like that. But anyway, yeah. So if you'd like a keychain, I think in the next couple of days we'll do that. But I don't know who I dislike so much I wouldn't even give him a keychain. I gave keychains away to everybody at CrimeCon. When you was talking about some people you have defended. Oh yeah, there's been some people. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there'd probably be some people that I wouldn't give a keychain to that I've defended. There's some people. Listen, man, some of the nicest people I've ever met have been criminal defense clients. Some of the most horrible human beings I've ever met have been obviously criminal defense clients. But it doesn't mean that they are not entitled to a defense under the Constitution. And if I don't do it, then who's going to do it, right? Unless I have an ethical conflict and I cannot take the case, I try to do whatever I can to get through that case, whether it be through trial, hopefully a dismissal, or a guilty plea, some sort of compromise, something along those lines. So yeah, I mean, it's just the way it is. Oftentimes it's, and this job, you see people at their worst. You see them at their worst, right? They've done something. It usually highlights a problem going on in their life. For example, maybe drugs and alcohol, and they don't want to deal with it. And on top of that, they're scared, right? What do people do when they get scared? They lash out people that are trying to help them. I know that seems weird. And sometimes you have to remember that they're scared. And I think I can get along with just about everybody, right? I mean, of all the DAs that I've dealt with over the years, I could probably count on one hand district attorneys that I could not get along with. And I've had DAs that were, they just immediately were rude to me. And I'm like, man, I literally I went up to one guy. Remember that I was telling the story the other day. My client was accused. He wasn't a good guy, right? He was accused of stealing a bunch of money from a lot of different people. It's like a home construction scam or something like that. And the guy was in the ECU unit, the economics crime unit. And he was just kind of a jerk to me. And I was just like, wow, that's weird. Like, did I do something? Like, I'm gonna start thinking, do I smell? What's going on, right? And so a little time goes by, and I think I was waiting for my client to show up or whatever. And I went up to the gentleman and I said, did I do something to offend you? Because we've just met, and I'm just here to represent my client. But if I did something, let me know. Maybe I'll apologize for it, or maybe I didn't. He goes, no, it's nothing against you. I just really don't like your client, what he did. And I was like, I get it. I do. But I'm not my client. I'm not condoning what he's accused of doing. But he's entitled to a defense, and I'm going to do what I can to do this. And let's be honest with you, it'll probably result in a disposition. And, that's just the way it is, and literally from there on out, we were fine. So I can get along with anybody, like it comes through conversation. It comes through, like, what's your problem? It wasn't me, or was, okay, turned out to be he didn't like my client. Well, that's okay. Maybe I didn't like my client either, but we got to get through this. He needs an attorney. You really want to deal with him without an attorney? Probably not. So, let's try to at least professionally, cordially get along. So that's just the way it goes. Question, Heather. I wonder if she was going to go for brainwashed by the media defense. That would be a first. Yeah, probably wouldn't be admitted as a legal defense. It would be mitigation, right? Remember, you have defense, you have mitigation. Defense is anything that, says I was legally justified under the law. Doesn't usually happen. You only have a couple of them. In murder, like I said, it's I didn't do it. It was in self-defense, heat of passion, mental health defense. That's usually about it. All right. So yeah, I mean, mitigation is they brainwashed him. He didn't know what he was doing. He was a pawn by all these people. The defense is actually going to create that narrative for the defense. Mark my words, but I think we're going to be right on that one. Frank, we got one more call. Who do we have?
Check. You got Brandon.
Brandon, what's on your mind?
Hey, Scott, truck driver again. How do you feel about the terrorism charges being dropped in the Luigi case? Because as I watch more of these cases, I'm like, well, it seems like the feds like to aim for the fence and see what sticks, if you will. And honestly, it seems like they overcharge a lot.
Well,
and
the charges that were dismissed today were in state court in New York. And the judge said that they didn't think that there was sufficient evidence to support the charge of terrorism, making it that first degree murder charge punishable by life in prison. So,
right.
Without the possibility of parole, to be exact, is my understanding of that law. I was a little surprised by that because it's very low standard. at these stages of the proceedings. And I think the judge would say, the legal standard is I got to view the evidence in the light most favorable to the prosecution, drawing all inferences to the prosecution. And that is the standard until it goes to the jury, where obviously the jury decides whether it was proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So the Luigi case surprised me a little bit. It wouldn't also surprise me if we find out in the next couple of days if there will be some sort of an appeal. I was on the road today myself for a lot of it, so I didn't have time to do the research that I wanted to do, but I think there's a mechanism that the state will be able to appeal to a higher court.
Yeah.
That those charges may be reinstated, but we'll have to wait and see.
Sure.
The feds and the state operate differently. Okay, that's what you have to remember. The state handles most crime in the state, obviously. And a lot of the crime that they deal with is like, oh, we just tripped over a body. We should probably figure out who did it, right? And they go to build the case, etc.
Yeah.
The feds are a lot different. That's why they have such a high conviction rate in the feds. The feds don't be like, oh, we tripped over a body. Let's go figure out who did it. They'll assist in the state with those types of resources. But for the most part, the feds build cases, right? Agents come to the United States attorneys assigned to their particular unit, and they say, hey, we've got a case for you, whether it be, a gun charge, a racketeering case, gang case, something along those lines, economic crime. And then they say, all right, let's go build the case, whether it be through, witnesses, documents, wiretaps, things of that nature.
Sure.
And when the feds are like,
so
we've got them, then they indict.
No, that makes sense. And that's, like you say, that's why they have such a high rate. But I thought their whole basis for the death penalty for Luigi was warranted by the terrorism charges. So,
and it's still in place in the federal
the
charge.
terrorism charge.
Still in place with the federal
I see
charge.
what you're saying. So
the charges
so he could still be.
Yes.
Okay.
He
so
still-
he could still be facing.
He'll be facing
death
the terrorism
penalty.
charges in federal court. The state court judge said,
I
well,
see.
I didn't think the evidence really fit the meaning of the statute here, so I'm going to throw it out. Okay. But the feds, that charge still exists. So,
Yeah, that's why I was wondering it didn't completely blow up my YouTube feed, because I'm like, if death penalty went off the table, everybody would be saying something. But that makes more sense if it's only been cleared on a state level and not federal. Okay.
Yep.
That makes more sense.
Because you can remember, normally the states and the feds kind of cooperate and they say, all right, who wants it? But in this particular case, everybody wanted it, right? I mean, they got charges in Pennsylvania, which normally in a death penalty case, you'd be like, yeah, we don't really care about that one, right? And then you got the state of New York saying, we're going to charge him because murder took place here. And then you got the feds that are like, oh, man, and remember, the feds, you got to have some sort of interstate nexus to
something that combined. Yeah, exactly.
Something involves
something
interstate
that intertwined
commerce.
the state.
Something involves interstate
I'm
commerce.
a truck driver. I know. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So interstate regulation. It's all federal related, right?
Is there? Oh yeah, FMCSA all day. But is there some sort of a predetermined pattern as far as who goes first? Does the state go first generally? And then the feds play it out and see how the state does in court?
Normally, they don't usually prosecute at the same time. They kind of wait. This particular case, everybody wants first bite at the apple, so to speak. And so the state court will more than likely go first. The defense, because this is a death penalty case in the federal system, will take a lot longer to do all the mitigation, do everything they need to do, drag it out as long as they can, hope the witnesses disappear, they can't find them, whatever. And, maybe they'll reach some sort of a plea bargain. And then also you have to remember at some point, I mean, even if you get a federal jury that's death qualified, which is basically they say, yeah, I could impose the death penalty, right? Because remember, if you are opposed to the death penalty, you can't sit on the jury. But if one juror says, yeah, I don't know, he seems like a good guy, and he looks really good with his shirt off, like some people seem to judge if somebody's guilty or not. You know,
There you go.
you got somebody say, not guilty. So they could still get a life without the possibility of parole. Like I said, some of the reasons it baffles me. It's like, where are all these people when my clients need somebody in the courtroom to support them, right?
They could have a GoFundMe, and you could you'd be doing all right.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy. We could put up a calendar of all our clients. Say, well, don't they look good with their shirt off, right? He must be innocent, right? Sure, it's only a little bit of DNA. Sure, it's only a little bit of a confession, right?
Oh, that's
but it doesn't really matter.
I'm actually wondering how. Yeah, well, I'm just wondering how when I see the feds humbled a little bit, like in like the P. Diddy case a little bit. I know it's two different worlds. I'm just wondering if they're gonna be more tone down their charges, or if they're still just gonna shoot for the fence on every case and make these big public announcements. And so it's interesting to see, I guess, the dynamic between the state, the politicians, and the charges that they want to just throw at the fence, just to make headlines and just kind of see what sticks. But that's why I called and wanted clarification. I was like, well, Luigi, he's, as far as I know, death is still on the table. So I don't know.
Yep, it is. And I do not disagree with you. I think your analysis was correct that the P. Diddy case was overcharged. And unfortunately, it was in federal court, so it could not be televised. But I remember when the charges first came out, it was like, ooh, this isn't good for Diddy, right? Allegations. Sounds serious. Well, as the witnesses came and they were cross-examined, they softened what they said a little bit. You found out there was a lot of consensual stuff going on. What did he get ultimately convicted of? Like transportation of prostitute across state lines, obviously against the law, but it's certainly not the racketeering organization that the prosecutors made it out to be. But guess what? That's the way the system is supposed to work, right? Prosecution makes an allegation.
Right.
Defense says, I didn't do it. Prove your case. And, it didn't turn out well for the prosecution. I think it was overcharged the way the evidence came out. I kept thinking there's more. There's got to be more to it. We're going to hear about all these witnesses, insiders going to talk about how he was intimidating all of these people and yada, yada, yada. And it just never came out. It seemed like a bunch of consensual people that wanted to party, and they were into some weird kind of kinky stuff, and everybody was enjoying it until kind of the next day. And it was like, oh, I feel a little dirty inside. You know what I mean? I feel a little dirty. I need to go, take a shower with a steel brush to get all the dirtiness off of me.
Exactly. Not to go on about it, but I feel like, the hardest part is connecting with the jury. From what I've understood, it's almost like being a manager. Like people don't they can't relate to the manager. Well, when a jury who is struggling to pay for food hears about a sex orgy and people getting paid millions of dollars in whatever restitution or whatever, it's going to be really hard for that jury to connect and feel sympathy for the victim when they can't go home and pay for groceries, right? I mean, that would just be, if I was on a jury in New York, I mean, I go through New York a lot, and I'm like, dude, people can't afford New York, but they still live in New York. So how are they going to relate to somebody who got paid, I don't know how much it was, $10-20 million, and they're like, yeah, well, she did sex acts that weren't consensual, but she got paid for it. I mean, that's just like the lack of sympathy that you're going to get when there's that much money involved.
Yeah.
And maybe that makes me just,
and that's why,
a messed up person, but.
And that's why we have cross-examination, which has been, told to be the greatest truth-seeking tool ever created. Oh, you said you were the victim. Well, isn't it true this is you doing this voluntarily? Oh, isn't this true? Writing love letters back to him saying he's a great guy and can't wait to see him again, right? Well, the prosecution didn't ask you those questions, right? So I guess we got to rely upon me to bring all the information that they're hiding from you, right? And when the prosecution doesn't basically dump all that out there, they look like they're hiding it. I argue, in my voir dire, I said, hey, let's get real. They're advocates. I'm an advocate for my client. If this was about the truth, seeking the truth, I wouldn't get up to answer a single question because the prosecution would have laid out all the evidence, but they're going to lay out what they think is their good fact. And I'm going to let them know what my good fact is. Bottom line. And so, that's why you got to hear, the defense doesn't have to prove anything, but they obviously get to cross-examine, which, that's evidence, the answers and the evidence that comes in by cross-examination. So, that's why it's been referred to as the crucible of cross-examination, the defining moment of cross-examination. And maybe things aren't always the way the government tells you they are. Something to think about.
And like you said, the Constitution matters, and that's why I keep watching your videos. You say it at the end of every video, so I appreciate you taking my call, man.
It does. And tomorrow,
hope you have a good night.
Tomorrow, it's Constitution Day, September 17th, 1787. Constitution Day. That Constitution was signed.
Important day.
Yep. All right. Have a great night. Great call. All right, Frank, I think I saw a super chat here. Thank you. Let's see here. What was the question? Love curly hair. Thanks for the super chat. I really hope he takes pleas out of the sake of the family and the Kirk family. Stay safe, everyone. Well, it really was going to, it's too early to say. It's too early to say. I can't imagine, he's going to just roll over. He's going to try to justify what he did. The defense is going to, explain to him, like I've tried to explain, that, well, I got a couple of defenses and those aren't going to work. So we really got to come up with something good on mitigation to try and spare your life, because, you're going to be lucky if the only punishment is life without the possibility of parole. And listen, if you watch that video, like I said, I see death on almost a near daily basis, or something horrible happening to people on a near daily basis. You become desensitized to it. But there was something about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I'll be honest with you, it kind of just shook me. Here you got a guy, he has security, public figure, obviously, not a politician, but a public figure. And whether you agree with him or not, like I said, I've watched a lot of videos, and that guy, I didn't find a single video where he was being rude, belittling anybody. So, he seemed like a pretty nice guy. Even if you didn't like what he was saying, everybody seemed to like the guy except the people that never met him. But the people that met him all said he was a great guy. And I don't know why. Like I said, I see the stuff every day, but there was something about that video where he got shot. It just kind of, it shook me a little bit. I don't know. It'll be curious to see what happens in the next weeks, months, years, as it relates to this particular case. It's going to be interesting. The defendant's own parents could be the key witnesses against him. His boyfriend is going to be a key witness against him. He's going to bear witness against himself in his confessions to these other individuals, his parents, his boyfriend, the notes that he wrote. Those are all going to be, he's got a tough road to hoe. He just needs to start coming to the realization he's going to spend the rest of his, at minimum, he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. And if his life is spared, well, he'll be lucky. And it'll probably involve Erica Kirk showing him some grace. and saying, yes, he should have that. But I don't know. Not yet for her. I just don't see it. And I get it. I mean, if somebody had killed, something like that, your children or your spouse, significant other, whomever, would you be out there saying, oh, it just seems like a nice young kid. He doesn't deserve the ultimate punishment. Most people would say he deserves the ultimate punishment. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out. Obviously, there is a memorial this Sunday for Charlie Kirk, plus a bunch of others throughout the week. It'll be interesting to see. And, but I do believe when I saw Erica Kirk talk about, be careful what you wish for, because whatever you were hoping for, I think you're going to get the complete opposite effect. I mean, Charlie Kirk had 1 million subscribers on Instagram. I read the other day he now has 12 million subscribers. So 11 million people joined in the last week since his murder. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. That's not what they were hoping for. All right. That's all we have for you tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. You know the drill. Subscribe if you haven't. Like if you do. Leave me a comment. Hit that little bell. And go watch my other videos this week. I believe YouTube is suppressing them because of the content as it relates to the Charlie Kirk assassination. I truly believe it, because all our other videos were getting 50,000 views, and all of a sudden now we're getting like 3,000. Yeah, we're being shadow banned by Google. So go check us out, please. Because in the last live we did on the Kirk matter got 20,000 views. So I find it hard to believe the biggest story in the country, nobody comes to watch a true crime podcast show that talks about crime events in the news. Doesn't make any sense to me. So please go watch the video. And remember, the Constitution matters.